Welcome back, grade 10s. This is Mr. Green with our second video for the year, and it will be another grade 10 video. And I'm just going to quickly try to look at a topic that we've been covering as of today, and that is the topic of factorization, particularly factorizing more advanced trinomials, okay, or more complex trinomials. And I'm going to be looking at the exercise from the Mind Action Series textbook, as you can see on the left of the screen here. So I have here 6x squared minus 11x minus 10, and normally we would of course just look at making our two brackets to factorize the trinomial, and we would factorize the first term and factorize the last term, getting those factors that would add up to our middle term. But for this particular example, our coefficient for x squared is 6, which is quite big, so there's more than one option here. We can't just say x and x in the first and second bracket, so we need to look at what those options are. Now, this is not that complex, but we'll use this just to sort of get into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the 6x squared, and I'm going to write down what we call the product options for 6x squared. Now, what does that mean? It means the factors that when you multiply them together, they will give you the 6x squared. So I can start with 1x multiplied by 6x. That will give me 6x squared. So that's one of them. Another option would be 2x times 3x. That will also give me 6x squared. Now, of course, you can say the next factor of 6 is 3, but that will pair up with 2 again, so we already have that one. So we've got the 2 and the 3 already, and you can say the next one is 6 itself is a factor, but 6 times 1 will give you 6 again, and we already have that option over here. So this would basically be our product options for 6x squared. Then we are going to do the same thing for the last term. So the last term is 10. It's negative 10 in the expression, but we are just going to work with the value here, which is 10. And the product options for 10 would be 1 times 10. It would also be 2 times 5. And now pay attention here. In this case, we are going to note down the sort of reverse options as well. In other words, after 2 times 5, I can say, well, 5 is also a factor, and 5 times 2 will give me 10 as well. And then also 10 itself times 1 will give me the product of 10. So after I've written down the product options of the first and the last term, I am now going to put these options in a table. So I'll quickly get that table sorted out, and then I'll get straight into the next part of this method. Alright, so we are back. I've got my table set up here, and it's a very simple table. I've got 2 columns. I've got the column for term 1, and I've got a column for term 3. So within these columns, I have sort of sub-columns. So under term 1, which was 6x squared, I wrote down all my product options for that term, and that was 1x times 6x, so it's that one over there. I've now written them one below the other, so in sort of column form, and then I've got 2x times 3x in column form as well. Then here in the middle, that is where the table splits, and then the next column is for term 3. I've written down all these product options over here, one below the other, as you can see there in those 4 columns. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at which combination from the column, from term 1's column and term 3's column, which combinations is going to give us the middle term. Okay, we're looking for that 11x. The purpose of this entire exercise is to, of course, fill these brackets with the correct factors. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the options from term 1 or under term 1's column, and we're going to pair them up with the columns under term 3, and we are going to do that by using what we call cross multiplication or cross product. So we are, for example, going to take this column and we are going to pair it up maybe with that column. So what we'll do is we'll see, okay, if I take 1x and 6x and I take 1 and 10, and I'm going to cross multiply. In other words, I'm going to multiply 6x with 1 to give me 6x, and I'm going to multiply 1x with 10 to give me 10x. Then those two options, I'm going to add them up. I need to add them up and see, are they going to give me the middle term of 11x? And I of course also need to look at my signs. So the rule of signs still remains. In other words, if I have a third term that is negative, then I know that my signs in my brackets is going to be plus minus. It will be different signs. So that still holds in this method. So if I look at my options though, 6 and 10, there's no combination of operations or adding and subtracting with 6 and 10 that's going to give me 11 or negative 11x. So I can see that this particular pairing will not work. Okay, but I just wanted to write it out to show you what it's going to look like. So instead of us writing every single possible option pair or pairing together, we can just sort of take a pencil. You can take a pencil and say, okay, so the first one didn't work, so this guy and that one did not work. So let's take 1x and 6x again, and we're going to say, okay, if I multiply 6x with 2, I'll get 12x, and that will give me 5x. 12x and 5x there's no way that 12x and 5x can give us negative 11x, so we can move on. What about 6x times 5? That gives me 30x, so that definitely is not going to get me anywhere near negative 11x, so we can move on. And if I look at 6x multiplied by the last option here, or last column, 6x and 10 will give me 60x, so we're not even going to consider that. So that means that we have now used up all our pairings of 1x and 6x with every guy over on this side, so it means we can move on. So 1x and 6x will not be part of our solution. So now we're going to look at the next column, which is 2x and 3x. We are now going to say, okay, what happens if I multiply 3x with 1? That gives me 3x, that gives me 20x. That also will not work. What if I take 3x times 2? That gives me 6x again. Sorry, that gives me 6x, and this gives me 10x. So that again is not going to work. Okay, 10x and 6x, we know that's not going to work. What about 3x and 5? That gives me 15x, and this gives me 4x. Now there it seems like something's going to work, because the combination of 15 and 4 we can somehow add to get to negative 11. So let us then look at taking this column and that column, and let's work with that quickly. Let's see what happens if we multiply that together. So I've got 2x, I've got 3x. I apologize for the noise in the background. If you can hear, there's some learners in the background outside where I am, but I'm sure you can hear me just fine though. Right, so those are the two columns that I chose, and if I multiply this out, I'm going to get 15x. If I multiply that out, I'm going to get 4x. So if I add these together, I need to get 11x, and the only way to do that, not 11x but negative 11x, the sign is important. So negative 11x, how do I get that from here? I need to have this guy to be negative and this guy to be positive. So now if I add that together, I get negative 11x. Remember, we said that because our third term is negative, we are gonna have to end up with plus minus in our brackets, right? So the signs must be different, and from what we've done here, we've got different signs. So now off to the next step. The next step is finalizing all of this by reading out our factors. We're going to read out our factors horizontally. In other words, if I look at this here, that part over there, the 2x, the 5 and the minus sign, that will be read as our first factor of 2x minus 5. So the sign that you used over here will go with the numbers or the factors that you used here. So that's 2x minus 5. And then for the next bracket, I of course am going to look at these numbers and that sign. So the plus sign will go with them. So I'm going to have 3x plus 2. And that's my factors. So I can say therefore what was our expression? It was 6x squared minus 11x minus 10. So 6x squared minus 11x minus 10 is then equal to what we just found here now. That would be 2x minus 5 and 3x plus 2. And if you had to multiply these guys back out, that will give me 6x squared. That will give me 4x. That will give me negative 15x, which will together give me negative 11x. And these two will give me negative 10. So that is correctly factorized.